in fighting for rights and justice at the intersection of gender and disability. For us, this is our favorite part. This is the part where it means what it is to be a feminist disabled leader. And to lead from behind, to live out our values, and to make the movements we operate in more inclusive and yet more feminist. The rest of our panelists today will also speak to the values they hold dear and that they want to see infused in the disability rights movement. They're gonna tell us their version of the story. And they will outline their vision of the future of disability rights based on those values. They will also share with us some ongoing work they are doing towards this future vision so that we all in this beautiful, safe space might learn and connect from their experiences. So what I'm gonna ask you for the remainder panelists is to please stick to the 5-minute mark so that we are on time and that we can be very concise. And for our next panelist, we have Oluwatobi Odugunwa. I hope I said it right. Beautiful. Oluwatobi is the director of the Community Grant Program at Autistic People of Color Fund. They are also a member of the U.S. Gender and Disability Justice Alliance, a group that advocate intersectionality on gender and disability rights in the United States of America. Oluwatobi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me clearly? It's nice to be here. To start with the first question, I kind of had a list of bullet points when I was thinking of the question, like, what is my vision of the future of disability rights and justice? And I would say space to dream, vulnerability, love, gentleness, care, rest, play, moving into and through conflict, collective care. And I think lastly, something that kind of encompasses all of that and that I would like to see more on a larger scale is more implementation and adoption of disability justice and its 10 principles. So the difference between disability rights and disability justice, I would call myself a disability justice organizer and person. Rights versus justice is the difference between like legal protections versus acknowledging how ableism works with other oppressive systems to marginalize a group of disabled folks whose lives are not valued by people who aren't us often. And so disability rights is more about working within the structures that we have to give disabled folks legal protections, while disability justice is realizing that like the systems that we live in need to be torn down because they weren't built with disabled people in mind. And there's only so much you can do to like update an old building. Sometimes you need to build another building that is more accessible, that has an elevator that people can access. So disability justice kind of like is the core of a lot of my values. And I would say one of those, one of like the, in the tenets of disability justice and something that like guides the work that I do and that guides the vision I want to see in disability rights and justice work is leadership and guidance by the most marginalized, the most oppressed. And this is not about identity politics of saying that like if you have these, like you know everything, but it's this idea, this recognition that people who have more at stake, people who have the lived experience, who bring embodied knowledge about how oppressive systems affect them, are more likely to fight consistently because they won't be free until all those things are torn down. So I would, as a person, I would want someone who has a lot of stake in the matter to be at the forefront of that issue because they're gonna take it all the way. There's no forgetting about what certain groups need, there's none of that. And if the most marginalized of us are free, then we're all free. So I think that something that I'm doing in the work, doing in my work, and I would like to see more, is connecting race, gender, which includes like transgender issues and disability. And I think we can see between like racialized peoples, women, non-binary, gender diverse peoples, and disabled folks. We're seeing attacks currently and have been seeing, if you go back centuries, on our bodily autonomy. We're being told that like the way that we exist, the way that we conceptualize ourselves, the way that we interact with the world, there's something wrong with that. And I think that it's important that like we are finding these like tones of similarities among various marginalized groups and coming together. There's a lot of fear mongering about disabled folks, about Black and brown folks, about trans people. We're like kind of painted out to be either like really pitiful, infantilized creatures, or like scary monsters who want to like corrupt your children and like ruin the world. And I think that like it's important that like we know who our allies are. And so on that note, I think that it's important coalitions, because single issues are not our most pertinent fights, and they never have been. Single issue fights are bent on increasing who has privilege. It's not bent on tearing down a system that says that this person should have rights, whereas this person should not. So I think that like we need to think broader and move more slowly. We need to like work together. We need to build networks of information sharing and infrastructure from folks who are working on the inside, NGOs, nonprofits, the UN, and folks who are working on the ground, grassroots level organizers. Folks on the inside need to be funneling resources to folks on the ground and carrying information for those folks to structures so that the programs that we're actually getting match the needs of the people, of the communities that we're trying to help, our people. And I'll say that we have a lot to learn from each other. I think that people on the inside, people who are structural agents, like I think we need to like speed up more. And people, I think on the outside, when we have resources, we need to like move with disability justice consistently, slowly, sustainably, so that we're not burning ourselves out. And it's only possible to do any of this work if we're working together. We need more cohesion. And so most of the work that I do mutual aid work with the Autistic People of Color Fund in Trans Aid Nashville that gives financial assistance and like resource assistance to autistic POC and trans people in Nashville, Tennessee. So I am a Southerner, an American Southerner. And so my goal currently is to help, answering the second question, is to help my people get to a point where they can survive, and then work with them to become more politically educated, to find out like who are our enemies, to name colonialism and imperialism and racial capitalism and gender capitalism, and to connect and identify what impacts the world that we live in. Thank you.